What's up, guys? So this is my latest project. This is a 1973 Mercury Hurricane Mark I. It's got the key for Mercury 644 twin cylinder in it. The way I understand it from the literature that I've been able to find online, the 73 Mark I's with the single carb made about 40 horse, I believe. I mean, this thing's in fantastic shape. I believe 940 miles showing on the odometer. Pretty much all there, only really a couple of few small things missing, but really in remarkable condition for a 50-year-old snowmobile that's been sitting for quite some time. Now, I picked this up down in the southern part of the state. A friend of mine actually sent me the Craigslist ad for it. I've spent about 3 years now trying to track down one of these Hurricanes in passable shape, and every time I found one that was within my price range or good enough condition wise, it's been gone before I've had a chance to even bite on it. So, you know, that's just the way things work out. He sent me the ad. It had been up for about a month, so I was kind of skeptical at first. Figured, well, you know, this one's probably already gone too, but I texted the guy, said, yeah, it's still available. You can come down and check it out this weekend. Made the trip down. Looked it over, knew I had to have it. Glad to finally own one. The guy was super nice, really knowledgeable about old sleds. He's got quite a little collection there. He's got a few really nice old Rups and a couple of other oddballs and obsolete brands. But just super nice guy, really cool to talk to. So as I understand it, the man that I bought this sled from went to school with the son of the original owner, and then eventually was able to buy this sled from the original owner. He took ownership of it in a running state, and somewhere between then and now, it just lost spark, decided it didn't want to run anymore. Well, doing some research, it seems that these old Mercury sleds and even their outboards of the era are well known for poor quality wiring that just deteriorates over the years, and I mean in some instances quite literally disintegrates over the years. So I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to find electronically getting into this thing. You can see I've already started tearing it down quite a bit, just to start cleaning things up and get the wiring harness out of it, because it clearly needs a complete rewire. But I mean, the important stuff is all there. The motor's free. I do need to replace the recoil rope on it. I'm going to have to get a battery once I get the wiring harness all rebuilt and put back in, so I can make sure the electric start still works. But hopefully it's as simple as putting a wiring harness in it and it's running again. I'm going to do my best to try to diagnose the CDI box, the ignition coils, the rectifier, all of that stuff as I go. Hopefully none of it needs to be replaced. The track is showing as much weather cracking as you would expect from a 50-year-old sled, but you can definitely tell this thing has been stored undercover its entire life. In the cubby in front of the seat was an old pill bottle, and inside that pill bottle was the last registration from the original owner, dated December of 1989. So it's pretty cool to know that this sled had a fairly long service life. You know, certainly much longer than most people tend to keep snowmobiles around here. And obviously it was very well cared for. Now, it's not perfect. All the important parts are there. I do have the headlight covers and the windshield that are in exceptional shape and should polish out wonderfully. I've already gone through and I buffed the hood. I did 2 quick passes with some Chemical Guys C4 compound and a Hexalogic white pad just to clean it up, make it smooth again. I didn't really care about getting any of the scratches out because this is a molded plastic hood. This is not painted. So very similar to most of the old Skidoos with the plastic hoods. But then I just followed that up with a good thick coat of Meguiar's Gold Class Carnauba wax. And I mean, it's got this thing shining like a diamond. So the tunnel is in exceptional shape. There is one rot hole on the right side just in front of the footboard. That's pretty minor. I've got to decide whether or not I want to roll this thing up, cut that out and weld a patch in to stop that rot from getting any worse. But other than that, I mean, everywhere else is just surface rust. The seat is still in amazing shape. The seats on these things are really cool. They're actually a molded rubber that's molded around the foam, and instead of having a plywood sub seat, they actually have steel brackets on each side that clip in just in front of the fuel tank, and then there's a pair of nuts at the front of the seat to hold it down to the chassis. Very good design on Mercury's part, and I think the fact that it is such a thick molded rubber is a lot of the reason why that seat is still in such good shape. The fuel tank, I mean, aside from some bare metal on top of it where the seat's been sitting and riding over the years, the fuel tank's almost like new, inside and out. This thing hasn't been parked with gas in it. The fuel tank still looks and smells amazing. I mean, the factory fuel lines on this thing are still in great shape. What I'm assuming are the factory fuel lines based on the crimp ends that are still there. I'll know more as I get to tearing into things, but it's looking more and more like this is going to be a simple rewire and ride it, and that's really the goal. You know, these things are only original once. It's hard to find them in this kind of condition here in Maine. Most of the sleds around here seemed like, you know, people bought them, rode them for a few years, sold them, and then they just kept changing hands and just kept getting the snot beat out of them, get left outside, and really most of them are to the point now where even if you can get them running, the rest is beyond trying to salvage. So to find one in this kind of condition around here for fair money is very rare. I feel like I got a great deal on this thing. I hope the guy I bought it from is happy with the deal. I mean, considering it's not running, not knowing how much it's actually going to take to get it running again, with the open shorts that I can see in the wiring harness, it's very possible that other components are burnt out of it. Hopefully that's not the case, but at the end of the day, we don't know. I mean, really, this could have been a gamble on what's going to be a very nice parts sled, or a long-term rebuild taking years to gather up the parts I need. So that's kind of the way it goes with these things, but in the condition it's in, cosmetically, I'm very happy with the price that I paid. And again, they're only original once, and with the lack of parts availability for these, a restoration is just absolutely out of the question. This thing needs to be preserved as close to the condition that it's in now as possible. So, we'll go ahead, we'll jump right into this video. I'll quit yakking. But we're going to pull the wiring harness out. I've already gotten the main harness out. All that's left now is the engine harness. The goal is to make a replacement harness that looks as close to factory as possible. Obviously, this thing's going to need some work and some parts to be replaced to get back into operating condition. But the goal is to make every bit of work that I do appear as close to factory as possible, and to use as many new old stock parts or good used parts as I can find. There's a couple of things that I'm already on the hunt for, but most of the important stuff is here and is in exceptional shape. When I rolled it in here, I immediately washed it and did a quick detail job on it just to see how good the plastics would come back with a simple coating of Chemical Guys VRP. And I mean, it's astonishing how nice this sled really is. So the plan is just to get it running, riding, register it as an antique, because here in Maine that's the most economical way to do it. It's, I believe, $35, and it's good for the time that you own the sled. Until you transfer ownership, it is registered permanently. So I'm not going to be out riding this thing every weekend. I've got other sleds for that. But I would really like to be able to take it on some of the vintage rides we have here, and be able to take it to some of the shows. I know the Maine Snowmobile Association does a big one at the Augusta Civic Center every year. That's usually off-season, I believe. You don't really seem to see a lot of Mercuries around the local shows. Most of the time, if you do, they're either trail twisters or snow twisters, because those are the ones everybody wants. Self included, would love to have a 75 or a 76 snow twister at some point. But for now, I'm very happy, and I consider myself very fortunate to now be the caretaker of this 73 Hurricane. Alright, so if you've never seen under the hood of one of these Mercuries before, they're pretty interesting. So from what I understand, and I'm certainly no expert, the earlier Mercury sleds, when they were designing the engines, the very first ones, they actually basically converted one of their outboard engines. They had some heating trouble with that, so they kind of went back to the drawing board and eventually came up with an engine that seemed to serve them a little better, though they are still known for overheating issues, which, given the design and the layout of the engine, that's certainly understandable. But even once they got to these 644s, the way I understand it, they were still using a lot of the technology from their outboards, including the Lightning CD ignition system, which is one of the ways that Mercury was kind of ahead of their time, having full CDI ignition on their sleds earlier than most other brands. By all accounts that I've seen in reading around forums and stuff from people who rode these when they were new, when properly taken care of and ridden properly, being mindful of the cooling issues, they were actually a pretty reliable snowmobile. Their biggest flaw is primarily their weight. I mean, this 644 with the single carb in 1973 in the Mark I's, as I understand, made about 40 horsepower. The year before, in the 72 Hurricanes, it made 35. The 73 Mark II's with the twin carbs were the powerhouses. They made about 50 horse, which, given how heavy this thing is, I'm quite sure it needs every bit of that power to be able to move. These are on a really narrow ski stance. I believe it's 27 inches center to center. They've got a 17-inch track, and I guess this was kind of Mercury's luxury or family model in its day, and really they were kind of shooting to compete with the Skidoo 640 Nordics. You know, and I find these old sleds really interesting because, I mean, we're talking late 60s coming into the early 70s when a lot of this technology is being developed. You know, snowmobiles in general hadn't really been around all that long yet. We weren't that far past the days of the old snow travelers and the other rear-engine sleds. Companies were really starting to strive for better performance. Racing was becoming more popular. You know, companies were focusing on improving the rideability and the handling characteristics of their trail sleds. Really, you had all these facets of the snowmobile industry all kind of exploding at once, with a lot of innovation from a lot of different companies. You saw a lot of companies from other power sports industries, like the outboard builders, like the lawn equipment builders, all seeing this explosion of popularity around the sport and jumping on board and trying to do what they could to innovate and improve things and sell sleds. Unfortunately, Mercury really didn't stick around long. They only built sleds from 68 to 76. But considering the popularity, even to this day, of the snow twisters and the trail twisters, and the fact that to this day, snow twisters are still out there dominating some of the oval circuits in vintage sled racing, I think it's safe to say Mercury kind of went out with a bang. So, I don't know if maybe it was a case of, you know, they did too little too late to improve on what they had, or if they just saw the writing on the wall that eventually the market was going to collapse and there was only going to be the bigger manufacturers left, so they just focused on what they were already doing good at. I don't really know for sure why they decided to leave when they did, but I think they certainly made some form of an impact on the industry and on some of the riders out there. I know for me personally, I didn't really know a whole lot about Mercury sleds, particularly the mechanicals of them, before I bought this, but I've always had a love for the styling of them. You know, even the 220s and the 250s, with that real bubbly space age styling. I just think Mercury really made some good looking sleds. And I think in a lot of ways, what they did with what they had was really innovative and really cool, even though some of their stuff was a little over-engineered and certainly a lot heavier than it needs to be. And obviously these things still have their faults. Really, my only big worry right now is that something in the ignition system might be fried or no good. It seems like there are still quite a few people out there on eBay and the forums and whatnot parting out older sleds that are too far gone to fix, and still hoarding and occasionally letting go of new old stock parts. So hopefully any obstacles I hit in this project are able to be overcome, because I mean this sled needs to be back on the trails, back out in the public, being appreciated by people. To live this long and to have been taken care of this well, she deserves another chance to be out there making people happy again. Hopefully you stick along for the ride. You keep up with the updates on the channel. The best way to do that is to hit the subscribe button and then turn on your notifications so you get alerted anytime I post a video. You know, and if you live somewhere in the state of Maine, maybe the old Merc and I will see you out on the trails or at some of the rides or shows in the future. Alright, so I've got quite a lot of the sled stripped down already. I've got the seat off, I've got the whole console and the bracket for the console taken off. I've got the main portion of the harness all stripped out of it already. What I'm assuming is still the original fuel line is in amazing shape. I'm probably going to go ahead and replace this T-fitting and these two zip ties with some actual hose clamps. But I mean, the line from the fuel pump to the carb is a rugged, solid line that's really not even weather cracked. It's got actual metal fittings on it, so in a lot of ways these sleds were really engineered well. You've got a stainless suction screen inside the tank with a metal suction tube inside the tank, so you don't have to worry about any rubber in there rotting out over the years. You know, unfortunately there are some parts of the harness that are going to have to be replaced. These taillight sockets, I mean, the wires are just destroyed in this harness. The insulation's all just deteriorated and rotted off. The wiring's starting to corrode pretty bad. And now these have two bulbs on each side. You've kind of got a dual tail light in one lens setup that's pretty cool. But you've got your main tail light bulb on each side, and then you've got a bigger brake light bulb on each side. Well, your brake light bulbs are just a standard 89 bulb, super easy to find. The sockets for them are super easy to find. That's not a problem. The smaller tail light bulbs are a 57X. Those bulbs are still super easy to find. That's not a problem. But I'm not having as much luck finding the sockets for them. If anybody's got a part number or whatever where I can get one from a Napa, Advanced Auto, AutoZone, whatever, or Amazon, what have you, let me know down in the comments. Or I may see if I can take these apart and just rewire them, because I mean, with the state this wiring is in, it's really not possible to just cut the wire off and splice new wire on it. The sockets either need to be replaced or pulled apart and rewired internally. As far as all your other connectors, I mean, they seem to pretty much all be your standard Packard style connector that was pretty much standard equipment on just about anything American made for 3 decades at least. So components for that, easy enough to find. I should be able to reuse at most all of the sockets that I have. There is one missing where someone cut the headlight harness plug off. But again, those Packard style connectors, easy enough to find. You can get bulk packs of the pins, both male and female, super cheap online, so it's going to be easy enough to reuse all the stock connectors and just repin them, run all new wires. One thing I really like about this harness is, I mean, everything's all labeled. You've got tack, you've got your tail and stop, your dimmer, you know, everything's all labeled on the harness, which just makes it super easy plugging everything back in. Really, the only places on this harness that I've seen any repairs done are right here, where apparently I'm going to assume probably the original inline fuse here, which is shown on the wiring diagrams. Either the housing burned out or got melted, or the wiring just got too bad, so somebody spliced in this inline fuse with what appears to be a brand new 20 amp fuse in it. And then down here, I'm not sure if this wire was something somebody spliced in, or if this was an original wire that got pulled out of the harness for some reason. But I do have a printout of the wiring diagram here. If anybody happens to have one of these sleds and you need this wiring diagram, just let me know down in the comments. I can get you the link to where I found this one to print off. And I'll just go ahead and leave that down in the description. So I just printed it out, grabbed my crayons, color-coded everything so my shitty eyes can actually follow it without getting lost. But the only blue wires that appear in the factory harness are the signal wire from the brake light switch to the brake lights, and one of the wires from the stator to the CD box, or the switch box. So, not sure if that blue wire that's hanging out was an attempt to retrace something, but I'm pretty well at the point now where I can go ahead and I can start pulling all the rest of the motor harness off of the sled. I've already got some stuff unhooked. I kind of wanted to have the diagram to go by as I work, just because the colors on this harness are so faded. A lot of them, it's hard to tell what they used to be. And I want to make sure that as I take things apart, not only do I have the diagram to go by, but also I'm taking pictures to make sure that when I go to put everything back together, I know where everything goes and how everything has to be hooked up, without question. So one thing I have noticed about this sled too, that I really like, I don't know how well you can see it in there, but on the front face of the CDI box, the box itself is actually color-coded to what wires need to plug in to where, which will make reassembling this whole thing a lot easier. Alright guys, so I know this video is pretty long and didn't really get into a whole lot of actually working on it, but I filmed all of this back in the end of November, right after I bought the sled and got it home. Here it is, August of 2024 now, and I haven't really made any more progress on it other than getting it torn down a little further than what I did in the video. I pulled the engine out of it. I'm at a point now where I need to pull the flywheel so that I can get to the stator and the trigger coil to get the rest of the wiring out of it and then start building the wiring harness. But if you're seeing this video, that means I've finally finished editing it, got it uploaded, and very soon there will be more content from this sled on the channel. So if you made it this far in the video, thank you. I hope you still enjoyed it. I know it was kind of long-winded and probably pretty boring, but I had a lot I wanted to cram into this video, and going forward, there's definitely going to be more actual hands-on work and kind of learning about the sled. So I threw some photos of the sled here in the end of it. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.